It's a little after 11 at night. You come down for a glass of water, flip on the kitchen light, and for half a second, you see them. A dark line along the baseboard, something skittering behind the toaster. Maybe it's ants, that thin, black thread sneaking in under the back door like they do every spring. Maybe it's something you'd rather not name. And the worst part is, you're not even scared anymore. You're just tired because you've already paid for this. You've had the pest guy come every 3 months. You've put bait stations in the corners, sprayed the cracks, sealed the gaps, set the traps. And somehow, here they are again. That's because most people are fighting the bugs they can see, while the real problem is hiding somewhere else. I want you to sit with that because it's the whole thing. The bug on your counter is not the problem. The bug on your counter is the last step of a journey that started outside, down low, along the ground, across a threshold, through a gap you've never once looked at twice. You keep killing the messenger. You've never closed the road. And there is a way to close that road for good, for less than $40, that was written up in a government bulletin before your parents were born, and then quietly let go of. 2 cheap metals. That's it. Stay with me. Let me tell you about a man who hasn't seen one of those lines on his floor in over 40 years. His name is Levi Hirschberger, and he farms a piece of ground outside Charm in Holmes County, Ohio. His farmhouse is 130 years old. Half the windows have no screens. The doors stand wide open all summer long, and there is not an ant, not a roach, not a silverfish crossing his floors. He spends nothing on it. I mean, nothing. What he uses, you can hold in one hand, and it cost him less than a tank of gas, and it has outlasted every single product on the shelf at your hardware store. Now, before I get to what Levi does, let me be honest about myself, because I earned this lesson the expensive way. For about 6 years, I did it the modern way. I had a contract with a pest service, $165 a visit, 4 visits a year. That's $660, and I ran that for the better part of 4 years. Then add the sprays, the granules, the foggers, the tubes of caulk. Another $200 a season, easy. And here's the truth I had to say out loud before I could ever fix it. It worked for about 3 weeks at a stretch. The man would spray, the bugs would die or move on, and right about the time the chemical smell faded out of the kitchen, they'd be back at the door. I wasn't solving anything. I was paying 4 times a year to rent a pause. The day Levi showed me the other way, we were on his porch, and I made some comment about his place being too clean for bugs to bother with. He just smiled, got up, and walked me to his back door. He knelt down and ran his thumb along the threshold, and set into the wood, flush with the sill so you'd never even notice it, was a strip of copper, bright copper. Not the green you'd expect on something that old, bright, like a new penny. It ran the full width of the doorway. Same thing under the front door. A band of it along the bottom course of the foundation, right where the stone meets the dirt. Copper mesh stuffed into every spot a pipe came through the wall. And then he showed me the second piece, and this is the part nobody gets right. A strip of dull gray zinc set right up against the copper, the 2 metals touching. The copper turns them back, he told me. The zinc keeps the copper awake. I didn't know what that meant, standing there. I do now, and so will you. Here's why it works, and I want to be clear, this is real physics, not porch folklore. A bug's body is mostly water, and the film of moisture on its feet and its belly is faintly salty, which makes it a conductor. So when that damp little body bridges across bare copper, you get a tiny galvanic reaction at the metal, a small flow of charge, the exact same principle as every battery you have ever held in your life. To the insect, it registers as something wrong, something it will not cross. The effect is strongest and best documented on the soft ones, the slugs and the snails, where the reaction with their slime is almost instant. But ants, roaches, silverfish, earwigs, centipedes, the pill bugs, the spiders that follow them in, all the things that have to come in low and cross a line, they turn back at bright copper too. Now, I'll be straight with you, because the bold promise people make about this stuff is usually a lie. A moth flying in over your shoulder does not care about your doorsill. This is not magic against everything with wings. This is a wall for the things that crawl. And here's the part folks miss. The vast majority of what actually gets into your house comes in low. along the floor, through the gaps down near the ground. The crawlers are the road. Cut the road, and the house goes quiet. The second metal, that's what takes this from clever to permanent. Copper, left alone, slowly turns green, and that green patina is a skin, and a skinned-over copper strip goes to sleep. The reaction fades. But pair the copper with zinc, touching, and you've built what's called a sacrificial couple. The zinc is the more eager of the two metals, so it gives itself up first, slowly, over years, and in doing so, it keeps the copper bright and bare and working the whole time. That's the same reason a galvanized nail doesn't rust. The same reason there's a little metal rod bolted inside your water heater that you have never once seen. The plain farmers who carried this over from the old country called it keeping the metal awake, and they were describing real electrochemistry without ever needing the word for it. Now, you should never take a stranger on a porch at his word, not even me. So here's the paper trail. This was in the literature. There's a USDA farmer's bulletin from the 1930s on protecting the home from household insects, and I won't pretend I have the number memorized. It's somewhere up in the 1500s, but the metal barrier method is in there, in plain English. The Ohio Agricultural Experiment Station up at Wooster, which is barely a half hour from Levi's farm, ran trials on copper barriers in that same stretch of years. And if you go digging through old issues of the Journal of Economic Entomology, you'll find the copper work documented again and again and again. Reduction figures that run, depending on the study, somewhere up in the 90% range. The science was settled before most of us were born. It was never disproven. It was outspent. And that's how it got buried. And I want to be careful here because this is not a conspiracy. It's an invoice. After the war, the chemical that got sprayed in the tropics came home and got sold in a can. The aerosol bug bomb showed up in American kitchens in the late 1940s, and right alongside it grew an entire industry built on one thing: coming back. The National Pest Control Association had organized back in 1933, and through the 50s and the 60s, the whole model quietly shifted from solving a problem once to managing it forever. 4 visits a year, every year, for as long as you own the house. Think about it from their side for one honest second. There is no quarterly revenue in a strip of copper. There's no advertising budget for a thing you install one time and never buy again. A man who screws copper to his sill is a customer gone for 40 years. So copper slipped out of the new pamphlets and the new textbooks. Not banned, not argued against, just dropped. And by 1965, a whole generation had grown up, never having heard of it. Levi's family never stopped because they don't read the pamphlets, and they never once went looking for a man in a uniform. Now, if you're sitting in a house you've owned for 20 or 30 years, thinking this is something only a fellow building fresh from the ground could ever pull off, let me stop you right there, because this next part is for you, specifically. You don't tear anything out, you don't pull a permit, you don't call a soul. You go to the hardware store and you buy a 10-foot roll of copper flashing, the kind roofers use, runs you about $22. You buy a roll of copper mesh, the stuff for stuffing gaps, about $12. And you go to the roofing counter and you ask for a zinc strip, the kind people tack along a roof ridge to keep the moss off the shingles, around $15. That's the whole bill, under $40 for most houses. You cut the copper flashing into a band and lay it flat across each outside threshold, screwed down flush so it becomes part of the floor they have to cross. You run a strip along the bottom of the foundation where it meets soil, pressed down into the dirt so it stays a little damp. You take the copper mesh and you stuff it into every gap, around pipes, behind the dishwasher line, into the weep holes, anywhere low that a crawler slips through. And then, the piece almost nobody does, you set a length of that zinc strip directly against the copper, metal touching metal, at the doorways and along the foundation run. Copper turns them back. Zinc keeps the copper awake. An afternoon's work. One Saturday, and the road is closed. Now I want to walk you back through a few things, because I have watched people try this and tell me it only half worked. And every single time, it came down to one of 3 details they got wrong. So pay attention, because this is the difference between a quiet house and a wasted Saturday. The first thing folks get wrong is they let the copper go green and walk away. Bright copper works, green copper sleeps. So once a year, early spring, you take a rag with a splash of vinegar and a pinch of salt, and you scour every strip back to bare, bright metal. 10 minutes for the whole house. That's it. The second thing they get wrong is the zinc. They set it an inch away from the copper, or across the doorway from it, and they wonder why nothing's happening. The two metals have to touch. Touching is what makes the couple. An inch of air between them, and you've got 2 separate pieces of metal doing 2 separate halves of nothing. And the third thing, the one that trips up folks in dry country especially, they lay the copper on top of dry tile and forget that the reaction needs a little moisture to carry the charge. So press the foundation strip down into the damp soil, and if your threshold stays bone dry, work a few crystals of plain salt into the seam where the two metals meet. The salt pulls a trace of moisture right out of the air and keeps the line live. Bright, touching, a little wet. Get those three right, and you have solved this for as long as the house stands. So here's where I'll leave you. This is one piece of a much bigger shelf. There's a whole body of this knowledge still alive in Holmes County and over in Lancaster County. Things that worked, that cost almost nothing, that got set aside not because they failed, but because nobody could make a living teaching them. And there's a quiet movement of folks in their 50s and 60s and 70s pulling it back, one technique at a time, taking back what should have come down to them from their grandparents and somehow didn't. I'd like you to stand in that line with us. Do one thing for me in the comments. Don't just tell me it sounds interesting. Tell me the exact spot they get in. Under which door? A crack in the slab, a basement sill, a gap behind the kitchen pipes. And tell me the year your house was built, because the age of that foundation changes how I'd run the copper for you. I read them, every one. And if you want the rest of what I'm pulling out of these old bulletins, subscribe, not to do me a favor, but because you've decided you are finished renting pauses 4 times a year. Next week, I'm taking you out to a Mennonite woman in Elizabethtown who has not treated her well water in over 30 years. 1 handful of hardwood ash, drop down the casing every spring. That's the whole method, and I'll show you exactly why it works.